Hi, welcome. Today I'm going to talk to you about our new virtual appliance. The business problem we were trying to solve with this is that our customers wanted a simple way to deploy new ZENworks primaries without the need for new server licenses, and they wanted something that was really easy to manage. So with ZENworks 11 SP4 we've introduced a new virtual appliance. This new virtual appliance runs on a number of different hypervisors. It runs on VMware's vSphere hypervisor or the SXI hypervisor. It runs on XEN, on Linux, as well as the XEN server platform, and it also runs on Hyper-V, making it really easy to deploy your primary servers. Now this also provides the ability to manage that appliance more like a black box on your network. So you're going to really see the interface for setting up the appliance maybe once. Once you've done that, all of your other interactions, we're hoping, with the appliance are really through a web browser. We also wanted to make sure that going forward, future migrations are much faster and easier than you've ever had before. So let's take a look at what we've done with the new appliance. So you'll see what I have here is a brand new appliance. I've just turned it on, let it boot up. Now it's going to ask me, of course, to accept the license agreement. And we'll accept that. And then it's going to ask me some basic things it needs to just get started. So it's going to ask me for a couple passwords. It's going to ask me for my NTP server. And then it's going to ask me for my time zone. So in my case, I'm in Mountain Time today. We'll click Next. It's going to ask for a host name at this point. So we'll give it a host name of zenappliance.zenguru.info. In my case, I'm using DHCP to assign long-lived addresses, so I'll just use DHCP. Make sure I've got a gateway and DNS information specified, and then I'll click Next. And it'll then go configure the time zone. It'll make sure it can talk to the NTP servers, and then it's going to come back and ask me about a second disk. Okay, so you see it's found a second disk. Anytime you do this, you want to create a second disk. That's where it's going to keep all of the content, all of the configuration for this appliance, so on and so forth. So we'll go ahead and say configure there, and just use the default appliance settings. And it's then going to go ahead and configure the storage. Once this is done, it's going to go ahead and boot up the machine, and it's going to leave you at a console screen that tells you, okay, now go to a web browser to finish. Now, while this is doing its thing, let's talk a little bit about the migration process. If you have an 11.3 appliance and you're going to an 11.4 appliance, instead of creating an empty second disk, what you're going to do is you're going to create an empty second disk and attach it to your existing appliance. Then there's a ISO file that contains the migration tool. You're going to run that on the 11.3 appliance. That's going to pull or copy all of the things that we need for the new appliance and put them on that second disk. Then you'll shut down your first appliance. You'll take that second disk that the migration tool built and you'll attach it to the new 11.4 server. Once that's done, you'll go ahead and boot up the 11.4 server, and it will detect that that's a migration. And so when we look in the web browser and go through the new install steps, instead of doing that, you would just see a migration happen where it would say, oh, I've detected that this is a migrated setup. It'd prompt you just for passwords, and then it would go ahead and start things up. So you can see here, I'm now booted up. So it wants us to go to the web browser. So we'll come over here and we'll hit that IP address in a web browser, 137.65.56.56 :9443. And you can see it's connected, and since it's using a self-signed certificate, I've got to accept that. So we'll accept the certificate. And here in just a minute, we'll get a login prompt where I can then log in to start configuring my appliance. Okay, so we'll go ahead, we'll log in as root, and we'll enter our password. And then we'll get what we refer to as the appliance console. The appliance console is where you'll do all of your administration and setup of the appliance from here out. Now you'll see here, it knows that this is the first time this appliance is booted up, so it wants to configure the management zone. This is going to be very similar to the install wizard. So the first thing you can do here is, you can see I can generate a CSR. So if you're going to use external certificate authorities, you no longer have to use OpenSSL to go off and create that. You can just generate the CSR here. You'll see if I click Generate CSR, I can fill in the details. It'll generate a CSR and download it to my machine. Otherwise, I just say configure the first primary server. It then goes ahead and asks me all the questions the installer historically has. So what do you want the zone to be? What do you want the password for the zone administrator to be? What database type? And of course, if you specify an external database, then you have to specify the credentials. In my case, I'm going to use the embedded Sybase database. It then asks about the certificate authority, and if you choose an external certificate authority, you can then upload the certificates you've received. You can upload them separately, the root cert as well as the server cert, or you can do a full PFX P12 file. When you click Finish, it then starts the actual install, and what you see is just this progress bar. You can also click the View Configuration Log, and this will give you a rolling log of what's happening during that upgrade. This is going to take about 10, maybe 15 minutes to get everything set up, and then once it's done, it'll be in a full zone. So what I'm going to do is actually shift over to another appliance that's already done this. Okay, so now I'm on an appliance where I've already done the setup, and the setup is finished. So you'll see then I have a set of management tools that allow me to manage the appliance. Up here I've got a set of things that are all about maintaining the appliance itself. So for instance, I've got ganglia monitoring running on the device. This lets me see performance, monitor performance. If you're using something like Nagios, for instance, you can actually hook in and pull that data in. I also have the ability to reconfigure the network or the time source. I can start and stop services. I can control the firewall and set passwords. And then you'll see over here I also have the online update. This is where I can configure the appliance for patches. So when you get the product in NCC, it actually will provide you an activation key. You'll go into the online update, you'll enter that key, and it will register for updates. That way the appliance patches itself automatically. Down here you have the more ZENworks specific things, and so we talked to customers and watched, we looked and saw what they normally did with the product, and we tried to make most of those things doable through the console. So for instance, here we have the ZENworks configuration applet. The ZENworks configuration applet lets us control all of the basic settings of the device. So if I come into the ZENworks config page, you'll see I have 3 tabs. The first tab, the summary tab, really is just an informational screen. It's going to show me the database things are connected to, that kind of thing. And so you'll see here I know what the primary server is, what kind of certificate, the database information, so on and so forth. If I go to the basic tab, this is going to be an editable field where I can actually modify a lot of the default parameters that are called out in our best practices guide. So things like your heap sizes, your thread counts for the loader module, so on and so forth. Finally, if what you want to change or need to change isn't exposed there, you can go to the Advanced tab, and essentially the Advanced tab gives you a rich set of capabilities. So let's say I needed to modify something to do with the data model. I could go to the data model, go to database connectivity. I can see the different files here, and I could then select a file and double click it. and you'll see here are the actual contents of that file. And if I needed to change something, let's say I've been told I need to change the UI pool size to something else, I could come in here, put it in edit mode, I could make that change, and then when I make that change, let's say I changed this to 101 and said save, then if I was to hit this restart services button up here, it'll tell me, hey, these are the services that I need to restart to make whatever changes it is that you have made through the advanced tool to go into effect. So you can see here that particular change I just made would require restarting Zen Server and Zen Loader. Now in my case, I'm just going to say reset to default, and that'll put it back to the way it was, and that's my configuration. The second tool I have is a terminal and file explorer window. Now we knew it was likely you were going to need to upload files, download files from the appliance. Sometimes you were going to need to run command line tools, so we kind of built that all in. I can also go into the firewall. I can make sure SSH is enabled on the firewall and in system services. By default, we ship this so that the service isn't running for security purposes. And so if you do find that you need to SSH into the box, you can go into system services and make sure that the SSH daemon is running. So you'll see here, here's SSH. It's currently showing as running, so we don't need to worry about it. We'll say close. And then as long as the firewall has the appropriate SSH pieces open, and the client can connect there, you'll see what happens is you get an SSH client running inside this browser, and you also then get your file explorer, and you can browse the appliance wherever you need to. You can right click and download or upload files. You can go back to the terminal and you can run, for instance, your zman commands that you might need to run, all right from your web browser. Then we have the logs page. The logs page allows you to see and download the logs that you may need. Let's say you're troubleshooting a problem and you want to download something, or you just want to quickly look and see what the log shows. You can double click it, and basically you're getting a tail of what's happening in that log. You can see over here it's loading the last 100 lines and it's refreshing every 1 second. If you need the file, you can always right click and say download, and that'll download it to your device so you can send it on to someone else. You can also right click a folder and download all the logs in the folder as well. You've got the log configuration applet. This one lets you do much the same thing the ZENworks configuration applet lets you do. It lets you control a lot of the basic log settings from the basic tab, where you just have some nice drop downs to pick the different levels you want here. So for instance, if I want to get more information or less information, I can pick that. Or if I go to the advanced tab, again, let's say you're working with support and support needs to have some obscure log file turned on, you can go in there, and again you'll get kind of the text file browser view. You can come in here, you can say, okay, I want to change the deployment configuration, come in here and make your change. So what you've seen here is the new ZENworks appliance that makes it very easy to deploy and then monitor, maintain, and manage, all from a web browser. So we hope you find this useful in your environment and that it makes ZENworks even easier to use than it already is. Thank you very much.